Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined here for this podcast by one of our good friends. We go out to the great state of Florida for Tommy LaStella. He's doing such a tremendous job over at Bracketeer.org. He also does a great job over at FAU Owls Nest, and he covered Mr. Dusty May back when he was with the Owls, so we're going to chat with him about his rise, the fact that he leaves for the NBA, what it means for Michigan, and then we did see James Nnaji about a week or so ago decide that he's going to be going to George Mason. Is that a good fit for him? We'll take a look at the Atlantic 10 landscape and just a few teams that our good friend Robbie is feeling good/bad about. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. And per usual, I beg of you, I plead with you, please you send in these Twitter/X questions. That lets me know what you all want to be hearing on this podcast and helps the off-season go by a little bit faster as well, because we are still several months away from games, and I'm doing my best to be able to fill the time with all these conference previews. We're through quite a few. The Ivy League is going to be up next, so you're going to be getting that all set, ready to go, and we're going to be getting set and ready to go for what is going to be an amazing season as we're going to look at all the news, what have you, and we've got ourselves a lot to be able to dive in on. And something else that we can dive in on is just what we've all seen over the last few weeks with our good friend Robbie LaStella. He does such a tremendous job over there at Bracketeer.org with our good friends Rocco Miller, Avetta Aberman, and so much more. And you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the letter R, and then his last name, LaStella, LASTELLA, and then the word report all together. And my good friend Robbie, it is great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Oh, Greg, thanks for having me. The off season is almost come and gone. It seems like, for me, I'm a bit of a college football guy too, so that'll gear up, and we'll be right in the basketball season soon enough. But the storylines never stop, Greg. We keep going even though the off season's winding down. So happy to hop on here with you.
Absolutely, and you know Dusty May better than anyone else. A few weeks ago, we saw him make the jump to the NBA, and just how do you take a look at this Michigan program now that they're going to be under the tutelage of Mike Boynton? Because I do think that Dusty May, even if he's not successful, he'll be able to get back into college very, very easily. He's got nothing to worry about there, but the big worries now is what this means for a Michigan program that is coming off of a national title. You just don't see this sort of a situation very often.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you are a Michigan fan, Michigan booster, it's definitely an unfortunate situation. But when you have success at that level, it's possible. Dusty was a guy, listen, like put yourself in his shoes here. A couple of years ago, he was just a middle of the pack, CUSA coach, FAU, they struggled to get fans in the building.
He was an assistant under Mike White to go even further back.
Yeah, like he really grinded, and there was probably thoughts in his head like, I'm not going to make it to the top of the mountain. I'm gonna, be FAU's coach until, I either have success, maybe get it better. But like his ascent has been so quick, and he's had to capitalize on it. And so, if you want to be a Michigan fan and slight him, I get it. But you got to try to put yourself in his shoes here and see kind of just the situations that have been presented to him. Now, if you look at it from Michigan's program's sense, the good news is there's been a ton of retention. There's not been disaster in Ann Arbor after Dusty left. I think Mike Boynton although the success was not there all the time at Oklahoma State, I think, he showed his ability to do what's necessary to recruit well. You look at Cade Cunningham coming under his tutelage. And so, listen, there's something there. There's hope there for Michigan to at least have some type of success this season, especially because a lot of the assistants are retained as well. And so, listen, Dusty's going to give them, I'm sure he gave them, an idea of what they wanted to do, what he wanted to do this season. And so I think it's not going to be maybe as glorious, maybe as an easy of a campaign as some Michigan fans would have hoped. I think the Wolverines will probably have to grind a little bit more, but it's all the success right in front of them is still there for them to take. It's just going to be, they got to come together. And I think they can. I think there's a lot of hope for this team to at least make it to a second weekend type of situation, and anything past the second weekend is really ideal. So from Dusty's sense, you gotta take it, gotta look at it from his perspective, and from Michigan's sense, it's not all doom and gloom. So I think this situation worked out for both sides as best as it could, considering how late the move happened.
Absolutely, as we do have our good friend Robbie LaStella. He does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly I think that it is going to be interesting to just take a look at the hierarchy now of the Big Ten, because I really do think that there's a big three and there's that tier one. It's the two Michigan schools in Michigan, Michigan State, and then you've got Illinois, and I do think that with this move, if you have Michigan maybe number one, you maybe now slide them down to number two, number three. I don't know if you agree with that, but I do think that that's sort of where Michigan is at. I think that it's still going to be a great season, but I do think that you have to lower the expectations just a little bit on this team.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think necessarily you can pencil him in as a number one. I think we'll see that when conference preseason rankings come out. I think this opens the door for a lot of teams, right? Like Michigan State's looking to have a big year. Who knows how long Tom Izzo is going to keep coaching? They're trying to get him one in terms of a national title, another one that be, and so I think Michigan State has a chance to make a little bit of an ascent this year. I think Iowa has a chance to really make an ascent. I mean, Ben McCollum was a hot name in the coaching tree. He stays after a big first year there without Michigan, to really be that dominating force. I like Iowa's chance to ascend, and you look at Nebraska as well off a really, really good year. Illinois, obviously, they're a well-oiled machine. Purdue. So listen, I definitely see a potential there with all of this talent in the Big Ten for Michigan to slide. So at the same time, while it shouldn't be doom and gloom, I don't think Michigan fans should be biting their fingernails and really worrying. I do see if it doesn't click, if the team doesn't click with Boynton, if for whatever reason the lineups that they decided to put together just don't click, I could see a situation where Michigan falls to fourth or third, maybe at third, fourth, maybe fifth if it gets ugly. I don't see them falling below fifth, but definitely see a possibility for them to be outside of that top three. I guess that's what Mike Boynton has to prove. He didn't always have that success at Oklahoma State. He's got all the talent in the world coming off a national championship, a lot of retention outside of Dusty May. If Mike Boynton is truly going to show that he deserves a second opportunity as a head coach in college basketball, this is the best opportunity he'll get. What if it wasn't Michigan, he was going to have to take maybe a low tier P5 job, G6 for his next opportunity as a head coach. So it doesn't get much better than this if you're Mike Boynton. Got to capitalize.
Yep, I certainly do agree with you there, as it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them. And then it's also of intrigue what we're seeing with a lot of these roster moves as well. There are some teams that are going to be still looking to add a few guys. We saw that with George Mason bringing in James Nnaji. We'll take a look at that move, the entire Atlantic 10 landscape, and a few teams that are a good friend in Mr. Tommy LaStella is feeling bullish/bearish on. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to be joined by Tommy LaStella. He's doing such great work over at Bracketeer.org with our good friend Rocco Miller of Ed Averman. They're doing such an incredible job there. You're able to bomb on the old Twitter side checks. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. At R LaStella Report, that is the letter R, LASTELLA, and then the word report all together. And Tommy, we talked about a guy that you covered a lot for many, many years in Dusty May in the first segment. Now let's take a look at a little bit of what we're all seeing with regards to roster movement and a few other pieces of news in college basketball, including the fact that George Mason, they're one of the few teams that made a signing via the transfer portal here over the last few weeks. They bring in James Nnaji, who obviously was just a big giant flop over at Baylor this past season. Big time fall from grace, considering the fact that he was part of the Karl-Anthony Towns trade at a second round pick in the NBA draft. Didn't go well for him over at Baylor last season, but now he's trying to be able to just reinvent himself. He finds himself now with the George Mason Patriots, which I think that this could be a good fit on both sides. George Mason, defense-oriented team. They needed a little bit of size. Want to get your thoughts here because it was so bad for James Nnaji last season, but I think that this actually could be a relatively perfect fit for him.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't click at Baylor. I think that was obvious. I think, the Big 12 was not the league for him. You have to look at, with how it's kind of developing in college sports, you have to look at it kind of how it is in Europe. Like if it's, if they're struggling in a certain league, you got to go down a level. I think George Mason is a perfect situation for him to go and find some success. Listen, I don't think I think people should move past the point of, hating James Nnaji. I think we've seen a lot of other players do what he did. And listen, the eligibility lines have fully been dissolved and crossed and tarnished. So listen, the guy is trying to make the most out of his career. You got to respect that. George Mason's going to be able to pay him some money. They have a solid program there in terms of NIL. Perfect opportunity for him to get paid while also developing in a league where he's not going to play in the neck, but it's also not a power conference. So I think it's a perfect opportunity for him to rebuild himself. And listen, I mean, I don't know how it'll all work. I don't think he can get redrafted in the NBA, but have a good year at George Mason. Show that potential that got him drafted a while back. And listen, I mean, that's how you rebuild yourself. And if we're going to move into the era of, this is the era of college athletics we're in, a situation like Nnaji, I'm rooting for him. I hope he's able to have a good year at George Mason and build himself back up. But that's what this is. He's got to find a way to capitalize here, or he can go down another level. I'm sure eligibility wise, I think, he's got another year, maybe two after this. So he can either go up or down. And this is going to kind of in my opinion, shape the rest of his basketball career. It's not like George Mason is the make or break of all, but if he can't succeed in this league, odds are it's not going to be a fruitful professional outcome for him. So got to find a way to bounce back if you're James. I think it's a good opportunity for him. I think it's all there in front of him. And he's just got to go out there and do it. So personally, I'm going to be rooting for him. I think it's like I said, it's a good opportunity. And if he can show just some of that potential that he has, he's a solid big man. Just got to get it out of him. So I think it's possible, but we'll see for sure.
Yep, no question about it. I'm very intrigued to see what is going to be happening there because I just think that the Atlantic 10 in general has had a very unique offseason as well because George Mason for the second straight year, they've done a nice job of adding, and I think that's very clear. VCU is going to be that team to beat, but for Dayton, I feel like they've done a very solid job, and the biggest thing for the Atlantic 10, in my opinion, is that they sort of, for lack of a better term, suffered from what the ACC has for a very long time, where with the ACC, the bottom teams were just very, very bad. I think that if LaSalle can take a jump this year, Fordham definitely took a jump this season. I think it's going to be helping out that conference as a whole in terms of getting more teams into the NCAA tournament, especially now with 76 spots available.
I agree with you, Greg. I think if you are a St. Bonaventure fan right now with how listen, you like what you've got there with Coach Gaiman, but it's just I don't know if it's enough for them to be competing in the A10. But my point being with that example is the stakes in that league have gotten so much higher to where, a bad offseason, in my opinion, which is kind of what St. Bonaventure had. I don't think it worked out the best it could have. That could put them in a really, really rough position for a program that not super consistently, but relatively often is competing for the postseason. So this league is definitely in a point to be a multi-bid league. And 2, 3, potentially even 4. There's a lot of hope for the teams like you mentioned, like a Fordham. Even Duquesne showed at times last year some solid stuff. Davidson as well. And so yeah. This is, those mid-major leagues, the American is lacked off in terms of being a multi-bid. However, the Atlantic 10 is still wide open. And I think, this offseason has showed that this league is competing for multi-bids and to be one of the top, if not the top, G6 league.
Yep, I think so as well. And I think that it's just been so big that they've been able to have a little bit of a windfall in terms of not utilizing many, shall we say, resources for football. And I think that that's going to be able to help them out moving forward, as Robbie LaStella does such great work over at bracketeer.org. Has joined me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Robbie, now most of the roster building is done. We're going to have a few stray pieces here and there. A few guys are going to be moving around. But how do you take a look at things in terms of the landscape right now? And are there a few teams that you're feeling a little bit more bullish/bearish on than most?
Yeah, I think in terms of the teams that I am high on, I definitely like Florida's chance in the SEC to make it. I won't, I'm not going to say it's a natty or bust year for Florida, but with the retention they've had of their bigs, there is a lot of hope for Florida to really have a big year under Todd Golden, and really, some of those guys can cement themselves as all-time Gators. In terms of concerns, I like to give credit. I saw a take from Jeff Goodman that I agree with strongly. That Georgetown, they made some good moves early on. I like Josiah Parker, but overall, in a Big East league where a lot of teams made some big moves. I mean, look at Providence. I just don't know if Georgetown is, they had some success last season, especially in that Big East tournament. So this looked like a year, and it still could be. I'm not a Nostradamus. I don't know what the future holds. But hopefully they are able to build on the success from last season. But I just don't know if Georgetown has enough juice. So credit to the Field of 68 team for pointing that out, because I agree with that definitely. But keep looking around a little bit. I go down to the American Conference level. We talk about this. We've talked about this before. But Memphis to me is not looking like a team that in Penny Hard, it very well could be a do or die year for Penny Hardaway and Memphis, and I just don't know if that roster is what is necessary for them to fully reach the goals that Memphis has. Some pretty lofty goals. It's they want to make it not just into the NCAA tournament. They want to win a game and maybe 2. So I don't know if that's possible. There's a lot of high expectations in the fan base, and the American is, it's not a 10 level just yet, but it's still solid. And teams like FAU, Memphis, Charlotte is going to be good this year. I think there's a lot of teams in that league that really are going to give Memphis a run for their money. And if it doesn't work out, it could be a changing of the guards at Memphis for the first time in quite a while. And we'll see what happens for sure.
No question about it. I do think that this is going to be a really interesting offseason for so many teams. You mentioned it with Georgetown out there in the Big East. Going to be really tough to be able to compete out there because so many teams have done an incredible job in terms of just upping themselves, in terms of just sticking so many resources into their basketball programs. I think that is going to be a great conference this year. And what's always great is getting you aboard, my friend. Robbie, let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Oh, Greg, thank you so much for having me as always. The team at FAU, Owl's Nest, staying busy. Football training camps are going to start going here soon. We are the oldest FAU outlet in existence. If there's any sickos out there who want to follow football or basketball, baseball, softball by the beach, Beach. Come check us out. We got some good stuff over there, and we cover the Owls like it's a power conference program. We give them some good stuff. So check us out. We're gonna keep busy over there, and yeah, Greg, as always, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Robbie, he just does such a good job all 12 months of the year looking at this great game of college basketball, looking at all things Florian Lang. Does a little bit of work taking a look at the New York Giants as well, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insights. So big thanks to Robbie for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to offer those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind there's the they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Within the next few days, I'll be looking to do that Ivy League conference preview, so be on the lookout there. We're looking to chew through all these conferences, and we're going to have ourselves a lot of fun taking a look at what we're all getting in this college basketball landscape. My job is to make this the greatest college basketball season ever, and bets that are won during the season are done through great prep time, so even though there might not be games going down right now, it's very important to be keeping our finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything. I'm going to be doing so, and I'll be with you guys every single day on this podcast, so I'll chat with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.